Okay, let's finish this little mini-series by making a very small game using everything we've covered. I've cheated a little bit. I've already designed a basic layout of a level just to save some time in the video, but I'm sure you can imagine how that's done. It's just a load of cubes positioned in some way. And we're going to have our character player start over here. Got to navigate the way through the level, dodging some hazards that we'll put in, and they're going to get to a goal object in this corner, at which point the next level will load up. So I'm going to show you that process, and then I'm going to leave you to do the rest. This isn't going to be a full game. It's just pointing you at how to build more. So we'll start by getting a character in. Let's actually be able to move around. So we need a sphere. And we'll start somewhere around there. Let's just frame it. And this sphere is going to need a few things. It's going to need a rigid body, physics, rigid body, and it's going to need our sphere controller script. So let's throw that on. Okay, so that should now move. Let's just have a look. It does. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Oh, the camera's nestled in a cube, so we're seeing right through the level. Let's just move it up and back for now. We'll sort the camera separately later. Let's just make sure we can see. So we can roll through all this, and we will make the camera follow the player. I'm not expecting people to be able to navigate around that corner without seeing it. But that's working. So we've got the player. And we've got our environment. So let's just put some hazards in. And we've already made one. So let's just drag and drop that in. So we've got the prefab for hazard 1. Let's plonk that in the middle of this bit. So the player's got to be careful to avoid that spinning hazard. Let's just check that it works. You can see it in the distance, slowly spinning, so that's okay. And we need a goal object, which I'm going to place here. And it's just going to be a cube, or maybe a couple of cubes for variety. So we'll create a cube. Drag that down into position. Best angle for this today. Okay, so about there. And it's a bit big for my liking, so I'm going to scale it down to 0.8. And it's a bit bland as well, so the goal should stand out. I'm going to make a material for it. In the materials folder, I'm going to create material and call it goal. And this is just going to be green, so it stands out on the white. Drop that on. And let's maybe give it some activity as well. Let's make it spin and bob. And we've already got the scripts for that. So let's drag the auto rotate on there. And maybe give it, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 as its rotation. And let's also put the auto bob on there. And just for the sake of seeing it in the game, I'm actually going to select my main camera and then go to game object and align it with my own view so I can see the game from here. And there we go. We've got a goal that bobs up and down and spins. I'd say the bob is possibly a bit too slow and a bit too high. So let's edit that script slightly. Let's make it a bit more reusable. So I'm going to fire up auto bob. And I'm actually going to make variables to control the strength and the speed of this bob. So we'll make 2 public floats. Public float, so floating point number. And this one can be strength. Default can be 1, which it is at the moment, 1F. And public float speed with a default also of 1. So that, with the defaults of 1, it wouldn't actually change the behavior at all from the way it currently is. But by changing those numbers, we can get a different effect. To make the speed take effect, I'm going to times this time by it. So time.time times speed. And then to make the strength take effect, I'm going to times the whole math command, the whole sin command by the strength. And save that, jump back to Unity, check the goal object, and give it a sec, and we can see that the AutoBob script has now updated. So the strength was too big, so I'm going to drop that down to, let's exaggerate it, let's put it to 10, and let's put the speed to 10, just so we can see if the code actually does anything. And it definitely does, so it's bobbing very quickly and very violently. So let's just amend that. I do want the speed higher than 1, so I'm going to put that to 3, and I'm going to drop the strength down to about 0.5, so it's half the original. Let's try that. And that's much nicer. I also want some sort of dock for it, so I'm just going to make a cylinder. I'm just going to quickly parent it to that cube and reset everything, and then I'm going to drag it out of the cube just so I can guarantee that it's directly underneath it. So I'm going to drag it down slightly and then play around with the scale. Let's make it wider and then make it much flatter. I think that's probably okay. Just sink it slightly into the floor, and then I'm going to apply the goal material to it. So we've got a cube and a cylinder to show where the player needs to get to. And just so we know that the players actually touched these, let's give them a tag so we can distinguish them from the rest of the level. We don't want to win just by bumping into the floor. It's got to specifically be this goal. So let's create a tag. Let's go to the tag drop down for both of them really. Let's hold shift and get them both. And they're currently untagged, and I've already made a goal tag. So if you've forgotten how to do that, just choose add tag. It will take you to that tag inspector view, and you can just click the plus, and I've added a goal tag to the enemy we already had. So my goal is now tagged as a goal, as is the cylinder, so we can actually come into contact with either of them, and we should be able to win. And before we can actually win though, we need to code that up. So let's jump to our sphere controller, and let's copy and paste the code that detects when we've hit an enemy, and let's change enemy to goal. And instead of loading the level up, let's just log a message out. So let's debug.log and put you win for now. Eventually this will change level. Make sure it's saved. Let's just move the camera again so we can see the whole thing. And in fact, what you should probably do as well is, with all this level geometry, it can get quite messy in your hierarchy. So it's a good idea to add empty game objects and basically use them as folders. So I could call this level geometry and drag and drop all of those cubes or walls into that level geometry, and then just minimize it so it's nice and neat. This goal is going to be called goal, and let's call the cylinder goal base. And let's align the main camera to my current view. So select the main camera, align with view, so we can see the whole level as it's playing. And now I've just got to wrap my brain around the controls a bit, because up isn't really up anymore, it's like diagonal. We do need to be aware of that with the camera later on. When we come to move the camera around, we've got to be careful that we keep it in relation to the player's movement. And bump, and we win. So you can see down at the bottom you win, or we can look in the console, see there that it did detect that collision, so that's okay. I think what we'll do, we'll take this opportunity to actually navigate to the next level, because there's a couple of things to go through there. We actually need to save this level first of all. So in my the base assets folder, I'm going to make a new folder called scenes, or levels if you like. These are going to be all the levels of the game, including things like the menu and the game over eventually. And then I'm going to come up to the top and I'm going to save the current one. So file, save scene, and I want to save it into that scenes folder. I've just called it Untitled, but try and give it a better name than that. So I now have a scene called Untitled. Let's maybe rename it there. Let's call that level 1. So we're working on level 1. We've got a hazard in now. I didn't actually check that the hazard still kills us, so let's give that a try. The lighting's not really doing me any favours at the moment. We should maybe colour the floor. Yeah, so that still works. We get that horrible lighting issue. Now let's make it so that the player knows the next level, and in each level we can just come along to the player and we can tell it which level comes next. So every time you reposition your player in a level, you can just update this, what's eventually going to be a little field there to tell it which level comes next. But we actually need a new level. So let's go File, New Scene. If you're prompted to save the old one, take the chance to do so. I'm not going to have much in here. I'm just going to put a 3D cube just so we can actually see something exists. Let's make sure it's in view of the camera. Scale it up a bit. Yeah, so there's definitely a cube there. So if I File, Save Scene, and let's call this Level 2. And hit Save. So we've now got 2 levels, Level 1, Level 2. And I'm going to jump back to my first level actually just by double clicking on it and select the player, and this is what's going to be in charge of deciding which level we go to. So let's edit the code for this, this sphere controller. So here, instead of just saying you win, we're actually going to go to the next level. And in order to be able to put the name of the next level in, we're going to make a public string this time, and a string is a string of characters, so it's like a sentence or a word, and it's going to be the name of the next level. So let's call the variable next level, and if we use what's known as camel case here, where we start lowercase and then every other word has a capital letter, Unity will format it slightly better in the inspector. You might have noticed it a few times by now, but that will actually come out as next space level, and there'll be a capital N as well. So public string next level, and then down here, instead of loading the current level, we want to do application dot load level, and in there we're going to use next level. Finish the line, make sure it's all saved up, hop back to Unity, select your player, and we can see we've now got this property next level, and it's nicely formatted, and we can put level 2 in there. Let's test the game. I really should have just moved the ball closer to the goal, but oh well, I'm getting some practice. And this time, when we hit the goal, we should be presented with a big empty level. Oh, okay, my bad. That was a deliberate mistake. What we haven't done is added these 2 levels to the actual build. So we are eventually going to build this game, but in order to navigate between scenes, they actually have to be part of the build. So let's do that now. Up at the top, I'm going to choose File and go to the Build settings. I've still got an old one in there, so I'm going to get rid of that. And it's currently got my level 1 in there, but yours might not. So what you need to do is make sure in your project panel, you drag all the levels, all the scenes that you want to be part of the build. So you might want both of them, select them both, and drag them up and put them into the build. So I've got level 1 twice now, let's just get rid of it. So we've got 2 scenes in the build, and this is a window we're going to come back to later on when we actually publish the game and make it a playable, executable file. But now we've got 2 scenes in the build, and we can either use their names or their numbers. See the number down here. So we could, instead of having a string as the variable, we could have had an int and just remember the level number, but I think it's a bit easier to go by name. So let's close that up. I'm going to move the player just so you don't have to watch me navigate through the level again. Let's give that a go. Bump into the goal, and we go to level 2. So that is a game, nearly. We just need to sort the camera and then do the final build. And I'm sure you can dream up ways to make more interesting bad guys and stuff. We could have really basic ones. You might just put, for example, another cube that's somewhere over here. So let's just reset it. It's a lot easier. So maybe it's there. It's out of the floor, and it's just stuck near that wall, and we tag it as enemy. And just to make it stand out that bit more, we also drag the hazard texture onto it, and that would now kill the player as well. So if we put the player next to it just to test, we've got a slightly more simple hazard. Make use of the other scripts. You might want some enemies that bob up and down, some that automatically move, although you might need to buddy that up with the auto rotation just so that they don't disappear. Because at the moment the auto move just takes them off into the distance, doesn't it? I'm happy enough with that for now. It's your job to turn it into a full game. Let's just sort the camera. So we are going to adopt the same system that the Unity tutorial from the Rollerball series uses. We're just going to remember where the camera started and then use that as an offset every frame to move the camera back to where it should be. So it's important that you get the camera in the right sort of position to begin with. So let's pick where we kind of want the camera to follow this player. Maybe about there. I'm not going to fuss over it too much, that's your job. And then select the main camera, choose Game Object, Align with View, and we're good to go. So I'm going to make a script, just as Unity do, to control this camera. So make a new script, call it Camera Controller, boot it up. And we're going to do a few things. We're going to use a variable that remembers how far away from the player the camera is. And then we're going to update it to move it, to snap it back to that position every frame in relation to the targeted object. So we need a variable up at the top. And we're going to make this private. We don't need to access this outside. This is going to be a vector3, which is basically an x, a y, and a z property. And it's going to be called offset. To actually figure out the offset though, we need to know what we're targeting. So I'm going to make another variable above it, and this one's going to be public, and this is going to be a transform object. So we're going to target the transform component of another game object, which will be the sphere in this case, and that will be called target. That's going to have to be set through the Unity inspector, so we need to make sure we go back and do that. In the start function, we're going to figure out the offset and store it. So offset is going to be equal to the target's position, so target.position minus this position, so transform.position. So we're taking away the sphere's, we're taking this camera's position away from the sphere's position and remembering it, so we remember how far away from it we are. And then in the update, we just need to act on that, apply that offset to the sphere's new position. So in here, we want to do transform.position equals the target position, so the sphere's position, minus the offset that we calculated at the start. And that should be good to go there. So let's save that up, go back to Unity and drag that script onto the camera, onto the main camera. Now, as you're going as well, you might want to make more prefabs. So this player could be a prefab, so that you can quickly drag it in from your prefabs folder in different levels. This static enemy might be a prefab, just so you can quickly throw them around, and the goal object as well. It would make sense for me to select the goal, drag it into this prefabs folder, and then in the next level, I could easily drag and drop there, and we've got another goal. Just make sure you do stay on top of things like that. But for now, let's select the camera because we need to assign the target. See, now we've got this camera controller script and we've currently got no target. This needs to be the player, so this object, our player object, needs dragging into the target. And even though it wanted a transform and we fed it a game object, it's smart enough to figure out that we actually meant the transform object of that game object. Let's give it a go. And now when we roll, camera follows along. So you've got all the components you need now, all the little bits and bats that you need to turn it into a quite a fun game if you're imaginative with it. You can make it a very challenging game as well, play around with the speed the player moves at and all sorts of stuff like that. There we go. So that is where you would build level 2, and you would update the next level property of your player in this particular level to go to level 3, and so on and so forth. That's pretty much everything technical I want to show you. I'm just going to build it now so it's a final executable game. So I'm going to go up to the top, back to that build settings that we used. We don't really need to change much, but just for future reference, just so you know what's going on. With this, this desktop build selected, we can go to player settings, and there's all sorts of stuff that pops into your inspector. So you can give it a different name, you can give it a game icon, you can set the resolution and the splash screens and all sorts of stuff like that. So I think I might just play around with the resolution there. You can lock it to certain aspect ratios and stuff. So here, supported aspect ratios. Let's make sure it always goes widescreen. So let's go 16:9 and leave it at that. I think that's something you can investigate. You can look at all of Unity's tutorials and stuff on there. But for now, I'm going to hit build and run. I'm going to save it into my project folder as final build. Hit save. It will compile it all. It'll build it into a executable program, and then it will hopefully fire up. Moment of truth. We get this little introductory dialog box where we can change certain things. We can play around with our inputs as well. Lets the player have a bit of control. Let's go full screen, 1080p, and hit play. Fantastic visuals as well. Made with Unity. And we're away. And hopefully now if I die, the lighting issue is resolved in this final build. Yeah, so the lighting stays nice and consistent. We didn't really do much in the way of lights, but I'm sure you can figure those out, because it is quite bright at the moment. Let's get to this goal and win. And I'm stuck in it because I haven't actually put a quit button, so I'm going to force quit my final build. You might want to use the application class to actually put in a button that lets you exit the game, but there we go. That's something else to look up on the Unity documentation for you. Happy Unitying. I'm going to leave you with that. Goodbye.